This is the How Did I Get Here podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Foley. Coming up next is a conversation I had with Markus, the owner of Rare Tea Cellar in Chicago. Rod, Rare Tea Cellar, thanks for joining us on the podcast. We have so much to talk about. I don't know if there's enough time in the day to get to all of it, but we'll start. Basically, the background of, it's in the name Rare Tea, but you also sell amazing caviar, truffles, and Japanese products. So you started with tea. How did you get into that?
So, my background when I got out of college was psychology and hypnotherapy.
Great, which is a great exercise for what you're doing now.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I'm like, why don't we just start importing things? But had a hard time making a living, and I'm like, I was always obsessed with tea, and I'm like, let's start, treating tea like wine. Mm-hmm. So we started sending money to China in the beginning, and then miraculously somehow, we got tea sent to us. And then I started traveling internationally and, going to all the farms and just schlepping suitcases of tea to, every badass restaurant you can imagine. And got our first real big break with like Paul Kahn and Park Hyatt Hotels.
They had the whole tea service there.
Yeah, they had the whole tea service.
That was set up for you.
We had $150, dollar a pot tea on there. This is 20 years ago, which was unheard of. 2 years ago. And people just started asking for the single ingredients in my blends. And at the time, I probably came up with about 800 blends. And it took a portfolio of about 800 blends and 200 single estate varietals to a couple thousand ingredients overnight.
Wow.
People started asking for like the blue corn flower petals in my Earl Grey, apple pieces in my Apple Noir, and it just exploded the category. So now we're importing direct from 140 countries.
Wow.
And primarily focused on Japan, China, India. Most of our herbals are coming out of the largest biodynamic estate in the world in Egypt. And then dabbling in, another, over 100 countries, just pulling single ingredients and just trying to one-up the ante on everything that's ordinary and turn it into something extraordinary.
What did you know about blending teas? I mean, can't be an easy thing to do. So how did you learn all that?
I learned it just from experience. And, for every great blends, there was probably 200 that sucked.
Right.
It's just like a chef in the kitchen, You're like, no, this is going to be great. Let me,
You're just experimenting.
Let me use margarine rather than butter. And then suddenly it's a nightmare. But it's like things just started coming together. And I was never scared to take the most expensive ingredient on earth and put it into a blend to try it. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but just got enamored and fell in love with the whole aspect of blending, and then realizing there just weren't teas for each culture in terms of for cuisine, and just really started exploring everything from Spain and Italy and all over the world. And just it feels like it's was an overnight thing, but it was about a 25-year progression of insanity.
We're not a tea culture,
right?
So what are Americans missing about tea?
It's everywhere else in the world. It's the number one beverage in the world besides water. Here, it's like a couple after water, and it's like if we could convert 1% of the coffee drinkers over to tea. I say this every year. It's a massive demographic, and I tell people this all the time. I've been fighting for years for tea to be cool. Finally, tea's cool.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you had a huge part in that, at least in Chicago. But everybody knows you around the world. I was at Noma, and there were Rare Tea Cellar bags, and I'm like, fucking guys everywhere, But back to why tea? Why wasn't it wine? Why wasn't it coffee? Why wasn't it something else? Like, how did you get obsessive about it?
No one just. Everyone was grazing it and no one was really touching it. Yeah. And, I've always learned that, coffee can overpower just about anything else. If they used to smuggle cocaine with, coffee, I got to say it's going to mute anything else.
Right, yeah.
And, it's not to rip on coffee, but I love the nuances of tea. And then when I started learning, just like Old Vine's wine, we started working with tea trees that were 100 years old, 200. And now, we have farmers pulling from up to 1,400 and 1,500-year-old tea trees for us. So
how do you get in contact with farmers in China about tea?
I just started
back 20. There's no internet.
Right.
There's no internet.
No internet, and it was literally like I'm like taking every cent I have, going and getting postal money orders because they couldn't cash anything else internationally, and somehow the system worked. And all these small farms just kind of, slowly got a reputation for, I'm always looking for what's not on the list. What do you guys got that you guys drink locally? What do you have that is only shipped to Japan? And like, I'm in India and I look at the board and it's like every first flush that had any meaning in India was going to a Japanese company. And I'm like, if the Japanese want these teas from India when they have some of the greatest teas in the world, I got to go deep into this. And just, really trial and error, but really more than anything, just being really patient and never taking no for an answer, but just being patient because, change is hard for people.
Oh, so hard.
It's so hard. Like forever, people would be like, your tea is 2 cents more than the tea that we normally use. And I'm just like, who wants to talk about 2 cents? Are you kidding me? Even 20 years ago, 2 cents is like a joke. So, and then we just kind of just took it to a new level and started working with a lot of people who just didn't care what it cost as long as they could sell it. And, over the years, trained hundreds and hundreds of tea sommeliers along the way. And, the whole industry has really changed right now, but everyone needs a beverage sometime. And there's always a time for tea. The mocktail movement is exploding the category. There's no question.
The teas and alcohol is an amazing...
Unbelievable. I mean, honestly, one of the single most important, places on earth that opened was Aviary. And before they opened, I just bum rushed them with every cool ingredient I've ever touched. I'd say almost every ingredient we've ever had in here is at least touched the Aviary kitchen at least once.
Wow.
Or at least they threw it over their shoulder. Something.
Great company to be involved
with. Just incredible. And I like working with people who are creative, so it also, keeps your creativity flowing too.
And also the chefs push you to find different stuff, right?
Absolutely. And then certain chefs have more, power than others, just in everyone's mind. And, when you get a call from some real heavy chef who really doesn't call anyone, you're just like, holy shit, I got to make it happen.
Right. So how does it go from importing teas and working with farmers of teas to being one of the premier caviar and truffle guys in the country, I'd say?
What happened was I met the right people early on, in the sense that originally it all kind of stems from a story that I thought I was going to be the only guy cool enough to not make an Earl Grey. I'm like, I'm just not going to have an Earl Grey on the menu. I'm going to fight the forces. I know people love it, but we're just not going to do an Earl Grey.
It's a very chef thing to say. We're not going to do brunch, or we're not going to have, a pasta marinara.
Absolutely.
And even though it's what everybody wants.
The people want it. It's like taking vodka off your menu. Are you crazy?
Correct.
What are you going to do? Alienate a third of the world?
Correct.
And eventually we're like, we got to make the best Earl Grey. So we started going to Bergamoto, Italy, transferring some of the finest bergamot fruit to one of the top perfumiers in France, and they would turn it into an essence to be a base for our Earl Grey, because the key is, oil of bergamot. And through a lot of these connections, it's like the world becomes smaller. When you work with someone who's at the top of their game, they know everyone else at the top of the game. And 23 years ago, they introduced me to everyone who's important in terms of importing, exporting, creating for all the Michelin chefs in France. And it just, not only has it been just a revelation just being around it and having the exposure to it and to get to taste all these ingredients, but it's also just, it's a very old school way of almost like a club. You either know what's going on or not. And once you're in, things happen. And we got to work with some of the top foragers in truffles, and I didn't even know what a bad truffle was, because the guys I was working with, all they did was the best. And then they introduced me to Caviari, one of the top caviar companies back in the day. And everything's been an evolution, and now we do our own private labeling and and buy master tins and then have it packed for us. But it's just it's all about the experience. And we're just kind of learning and growing every day. And it, we knew that, I knew in my heart there was no way we could survive just on tea, in the sense that you got to sell a lot of tea to a restaurant.
Right.
It takes a lot, and you don't want to push. Everyone's pushy out there. I don't like to be pushy. And how else can we work with the staff? And so we started working with the bar, started working with the kitchen, and just seeing what people wanted. And now we've got on our roster probably 45 of the top foragers in the country, working with them, and just all these little categories of just some of the greatest artisan producers and, people who just take food and herbs and, life. They take it seriously, and they really want to create an amazing product. And a lot of it is already created by nature. You just need someone who cares enough to
go get it,
right, and to harvest it and then protect it.
Yeah. At what point, when you were just selling teas, did you have the realization of, I'm an importer now? And then I guess the flip side to that question is, what was the conversation like to say, we need to do more than just teas? Like, was it a natural process, or was it like a business model?
It was the opposite of a business model.
Right. That's
it was
what
like
I knew.
An inverted business model. It was like trial and error.
We fell into it backwards.
It's
more
like
or less
one of those things, honestly, if I would have just worked for some of the greatest people in the industry who imported before, a lot of what I went through wouldn't have happened. But at the same time, I wouldn't have seen a lot of opportunities and, had experiences when we took chances. And we've taken so many chances, and some of the biggest chances have turned out to be some of the biggest wins for our company.
What are some of those? What were some of the biggest milestones for the company, you think?
I mean, I'd say some of the biggest were when, when I didn't have to go out there and seek business,
sell.
and they started,
right.
Calling me. When I didn't have to do the road show, starting about 6 years ago. I mean, up until about 7 years ago, it was just me and a couple people. It was like, people like needed some tea on the fly. I'm like, all right, let's put on the smock and put on the gloves and let's, blend and pack some tea. And I still do a lot of blending, but it's, who knew, how it was going to all evolve. And it just sprung into something magical.
Yeah. So when you first started, where did you think it was going?
I didn't know. I just thought there was just people needed tea, and I didn't know if I was going to open a store or what. But I loved being in the backs of restaurants and loved seeing what was going on. And, it's like I almost didn't even know how to approach a restaurant from the front door. It was like you just get used to just walking in the back. And, especially, chefs became the new rock stars. And halfway in the middle of our business, we're in places where I'm just like pinching myself. They're like, oh, it's like so-and-so's coming to town. We need the most VIP experience. What do you got? And I'm just like, it's historic. It really, it gave me the chills.
What have you learned over the years about being an importer?
What I've learned is, up until COVID, I had no idea how good we had it. I thought it was rough.
Fucking point. Yeah.
I thought it was rough before, and then COVID hit, and it was like suddenly it was like taking the gas out of every airplane. It was like suddenly there's no truck that can deliver anything.
Right.
And it still is so slow from what it used to be. We used to be able to use the postal system in remote regions of Japan and ship things direct. We get it 3 days later, like insane situations, But now you kind of got to reinvent the wheel, and also it's got to be really good to import it. But when it's good, people don't want to switch out.
Right.
And so now we're forced to, rather than ship just containers, hundreds and thousands of DHL boxes a month.
Really?
Just epic. Like, it's unbelievable what we have to ship just in small parcel, just because no one has 6 weeks to a year, to get the product. It's like people are going to switch out.
Yeah.
And I just want to keep people flowing. And it's so nice when someone notices that some ingredient or something, a smoked tea on their menu is a game changer.
Yeah, right.
Our wild banana is like the coolest dried fruit they've ever had.
It's the most amazing thing that you've ever sent me.
Oh, awesome.
And it was one of those things where it's like, hey, you should try this. And I'm like, I want as much as you can get me. Yeah, it's so delicious.
Just people just go nuts.
Yeah.
So it's hard to believe how slow it is. And I think a lot of people are just kind of more taking, like a lot of importers and exporters, just people are just doing less business and, don't want to deal with the hassle, but with the hassle brings the greatness sometimes.
So you have a better handle on this than most of us. There's still a supply chain issue from the pandemic.
Massive.
Where's it coming from? How? Is it just clogged?
It's the clogging, but even more so, it's like, imagine out of nowhere you have a 120-year-old company that always had, let's say, 75 employees. COVID hits, you lose half of these artisan, people who probably used to do the job of maybe 100 people, and it's hard to get that back. People don't want to, hand ladle butter like at Bordier. They don't want to ferment, magical soy sauce and wait 2.5 years to bottle it and then check it every day in a cedar barrel that at any moment could explode.
Right.
It's become a totally different scene, and I think it makes it that much more exciting on the artisan side. But at the same time, you got to deal with shortages. There's just no way around it.
I remember talking to you one time during the pandemic with Yuzu Kosho. I'm obsessed with it, and you get the greatest product from Japan, and you're like, the factory's not making it anymore.
It's like insane.
And you're like, oh. And I'm like, okay, well, they'll just start making it again. But I didn't understand, like, when a factory just stops making for one day, the ripple effect that would have. And even if they started making it again now, I don't even know if their factory's up and running, but that product is not available anymore.
Right.
So as an importer, when you have such a great product like the Yuzu Kosher, the company that came from, it's the best product online. I've tasted all of them. Where do you go? How do you fill that void of, there's obviously lesser products that aren't as good, or how do you pivot to find something else?
We'll try a number of new ingredients in the category. Not always blown away, but once in a while we'll find something really good.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you just restart the relationship with someone else. Or we'll try and, have someone custom blend us some things.
Right.
Some things work out, some things don't. But it sucks to, when you have 100 of the coolest guys in the country all asking for the same product. And you're just like, if I get one more call about the 15-year-old soy sauce that we had in stock for 20 years, I may cry.
Fuck.
It's just, and it's not about just selling. It's more, it affects the company that created the product. It affects us because we're the importer, and it just changes people's, once you get to something wonderful and lovely, or just to appreciate every aspect of whether it's a food or a drink, and then you have to take it in another direction. It's a reinvention. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I never thought I would have to take those calls, but considering what people went through during COVID, it's nothing.
Right.
So
when you find a smaller producer that's making the same thing, something better, but it's a way smaller product, like the yield's 20% than what you used to get.
Yeah.
How does that work when you want to say, okay, I'll buy everything? Like, you only know that you're bringing this amount in, and they're not going to be able to keep up with the orders. Like, that's another obstacle you have to overcome. So you get this product and everybody loves it and they want more, and you can't get it. So is it best to like loved and had the experience? What is that expression? Loved and lost and never to have loved.
I mean, it's the most confusing thing. It's just, you want to deliver, but at the same time, you're only human. And I used to, pre-COVID, I would beat myself up when we were short on something, whether it had anything to do with us or not. And you just want to deliver, and then COVID hit, and after meditating through it for 2 years, you just have to accept that certain things, you got to do a little of a pivot and just be happy.
Right.
Just bring the flavor. But it's hard. Like, there's so many key ingredients we have. I mean, if people knew how much we go through of certain things, it's like mind-boggling. The most small esoteric things, the guy, they'll be like, we have 200 cases at the factory. I mean, I'll take 195,
Right.
I'd take it all, but you got to give someone a cup little,
Correct. Right.
But we want the flavor, Just love it. It's a luxury to eat the good stuff.
Yeah.
And to blend the good stuff and touch the good stuff.
What don't chefs understand about what you do?
I think
if you were talking to chefs right now, you'd be like, listen, this is how it is, man.
A lot of chefs don't understand the breadth of what we touch. And it has a lot to do with my ADD. I love to just have a lot going on, lot going on in my head. And I love to just, track and follow a number of things at the same time. And I would say, wait, what was the question one more time?
What do chefs don't understand about what you do?
Yeah, they just don't understand how deep we go and how far roots spread. And people are always like, so do you ship to California? It's like, we have 400 of the greatest restaurants in the world in California. The nice thing about what we do is, and I think the greatest thing about being in the chef community is, sure, there's some people who fall off the face of the earth and have a situation, and God bless them. I hope, I wish everyone the best, but to watch so many people I know in the industry, especially over the last 20 years, grow and become not only the most powerful chefs I know, but also just some of the most creative and charismatic and just amazing people. And it's like I say all the time, people are like, well, what's the big deal with the chefs? And I'm like, it's a lot easier to get a front row seat at the Rolling Stones than it is to get a 7:00 res at the top restaurant in Chicago.
Correct.
You know what I mean? It's just, there's only so many reses. There's nothing. And people are just dying to go out and experience things. And it's become a different system right now where people are really thinking ahead of time where they're going. And when it's hot,
Yeah.
And when the food's great, it's epic.
Right. So what was the pivot for COVID? Everything shut down. You can't import anything. Restaurants are still kind of open. They're doing to go, so people still need products. And you have a limited inventory or an inventory that this is all we have?
We had a decent inventory. Obviously, we didn't know it was coming. If I knew it was coming, I would have done some crazy stuff.
Obviously.
Yeah. It would have been nuts.
Yeah.
But we just had to breathe through it.
Yeah.
But it was crazy because, certain industries, that's like in our industry, it just sucked the air out of the room. And, we went from a couple hundred orders, a day wholesale to like 2.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow. You didn't want anyone to get sick.
You didn't want anybody to get sick.
So it was like
another layer.
So it was like my team was very tight. Everyone gets along. They're all buddies. And it was like there were no outsiders during that time. So it was hard. It was a little more remote. Got to spend a lot of time with the dogs, and my lady. But I think sadly the reset was important. I'm glad it happened now.
I agree.
And not when I'm even older. But I think it's a good reset, and it really just put life into perspective. Like, so much does not matter.
100%. Well said. Yeah.
I mean, what I was worried about before is like a joke.
It's amazing.
It's incredible. And it's like now you just, it really, the reset was powerful. And I think on the other side, it's an interesting time just now because, there aren't as many chefs in the kitchen. There aren't as many servers. There aren't as many people, waiting tables or tending bar. And now the ingredients can shine even more. Where in the past it was maybe creativity. Now there's so less people, I feel like, in the industry.
Yeah.
And there's so much growth. It's insane.
Right.
How's
the day-to-day changed since the pandemic then? Like, how did you reevaluate the business and say, okay, listen, this isn't important. We're not going to do X, Y, and Z anymore?
A couple, like we're small enough that we can kind of pivot on a dime. And luckily, I've been very careful on some certain moves, but at the same time, it's like you just kind of pick your battles, and certain things you just don't touch anymore. But the truth is, it's amazing how people want to make one call and do at least buy 20-30% of what they need for their kitchen, or schmaltz for all their different dishes just to kind of one up things, and different teas. So it's like a lot of it's maintained the same, but a lot of it is like, oh, that vinegar isn't available anymore. Fine, we're gonna just find 7 other ones that are great.
Yeah, correct, right.
And you realize the world moves on.
You have to move on with it.
You have to move on with it. You have to, and it's like, oh, this won't be ready for 6 months. Like, just breathe through it. There's nothing we can do.
But I think you're really good. You're one of the best at somebody ordering something and then you sending little samples of, you gotta fucking try this. And that's how I get turned on to so many things, is from you, of like, you need to try this or you need to try that, and like, you're really good about it. But what are those, some of the, over the years, some of the lost leaders? Did you ever bring something in and be like, this is going to be the new thing that everybody's going to want, and then nobody wanted it?
I think a lot of things on the dried side, a lot of things on the dried mushroom side, I think people still don't know how to work with dried mushrooms.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's like tea. Would you say dried mushrooms are, it's just like tea? Yeah.
It's very similar. And it's almost like, it's funny. It's like, I feel like the best chefs I work with are the guys who always take a peek at what we send as samples.
Yeah.
Like, I just never forget, like, Chef Katsu, when he had his place, you know, on Peterson. It's still, I think it's one of the best Japanese restaurants, you know, ever. I just loved it. And the guy was, you know, over, you know, he's still around. Great guy. He texts me all the time. He wants me to golf with him. But it's like, you know, he's 75 years old, sushi chef, and he's enamored and excited as to, you know, what we threw in there to kind of turn him on to new things. And it's like, I don't know, I just think it's those chefs who constantly want to taste that aren't in it just for, you know, a paycheck. They're in it because they love it and they, you know, want to give their heart and soul to every dish. And they're also just passionate. I mean, flavor is addicting. I could, you know, if someone was like, hey, we're going to have the most epic honey tasting on earth, I don't know how I could miss it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like there's so many categories. It's just love learning, and you learn as much from the bad as the good, you know?
Are you at the point where producers from around the world are contacting you?
Definitely.
How do those conversations start and go?
You know, a lot of them are super weird because there's always a language barrier.
Yeah.
But I've learned to just be real careful what you say, and just, you know, if you translate it, you make sure the translator knows what's going on. But, you know, we're approached constantly. And really the truth is, until you taste it.
Correct.
Or touch it, or, you know, or at least hear about it from someone, it's hard to just import it. But there's a lot of things on the fly we've done, and just worked out fantastic, you know? It just, I feel like when someone's at a certain level, whether it's like these guys we work with in France who have like an armory where they age cheese, like, I would take anything out of their armory. Like, they're just wizards. It's like the Yodas of cheese. And it's all these little, you know, artists all over the world. You know, same with my guys who, you know, grow chrysanthemum for us or what have you. Like, they're only going to send us the best because they know we love certain grades, and you know, they're passionate. It's just, it's nice when people start speaking the same language, but it takes time. It's an evolution. Nothing is like flicking a switch. Everyone wants something instantaneous. I had tea estates that didn't want to work with me for 10 years, and they're like, we're best friends now, you know? I mean, we're now able, like, there's like in Darjeeling, they have like different flushes of first flush. The most wanted first flush is always DJ1. It's the first one in the Himalayan mountains. That's the one I always saw going to Japan. This year we got 10 of them. There's only, you know, there's less than 50 estates I would even work with out there. So it's just, it's, some of those situations are just miraculous. It's an honor that we're able to pull it off. And, you know, the stuff is has so much meaning and so much depth to it. You know, you almost don't want to sell it all, you know? Just want to hoard it. Lose your mind.
I almost know the answer to this next question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. You absolutely love it when chefs come to you and try to find some rare ingredient that people have never heard of before.
Sure.
Like, that's your whole game, is like finding the rare stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I love it.
Yeah. When you're looking for something weird, not so much weird, but rare, how does that go? Do you have a meeting and say, hey, I think these things are going to be trendy, or I see a lot of chefs in Japan or China using these ingredients, let's start bringing it in? How does that conversation happen?
It usually happens organically, and it's usually not even a conversation. It's like possibly with the chef just talking, but it's sometimes as simple as like eating, you know, having someone took me out to Masa 15 years ago, and I'm like, what is this on the plate? And they're like, well, you know, it's chef's special thing, and $20 later, you know, I found out it was Okinawa sweet potato vinegar. It's like those kind of things just have stuck with me from, you know, those days, and you learn about some niche somewhere along the way, and, you know, and then you just kind of has a lot of legs to it.
But that's the fun part of your job.
It's the best part. I love it. And I love just trying new things, and just, you know, and just doing the pivot, see what's this, like, oh, this is American soy, this is Japanese, this is Korean. It's like, I don't care where anything's from. I just want it to deliver, you know? And when it delivers, it's magic.
What small producers and products in the United States you're excited about? You
know, always been real big fans of the Bourbon Barrel Foods guys who do the Kentucky soy. Absolutely love it. I'm trying to think of who else we really love in the States. Always been very close with Steve Stauer to Bliss.
Bliss is great.
Yeah, we're doing, you know.
What a great, they've come a long way.
I mean, he's one of those guys who every time he comes out with something, I'm like, let's try it. And it's like, it always blows me away. I mean, even his hot sauce. I'm not a big hot sauce guy. it's perfectly balanced.
Yeah.
So we're doing now with him, the nice thing is now some of your heroes become like your, partners, and, we're about to launch a yuzu vinegar that we made with him, and a wild Thai banana bourbon maple syrup, and, just taking fun things that I've always imported. We probably import more yuzu peel than almost anyone I know.
Yeah.
At least at the level we're at. And some of these ingredients are as special as it gets. And you take those and you can create some magical things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How much tea are you selling? Like, has truffles and caviar and all these other amazing products. Are you still a tea-based company?
Still a tea-based company. Yeah. It's at least half of what we do. And, it's like every other industry. Pardon me. A lot of people, the old world way of doing things is kind of dying out, and there aren't as many people who want to, hand tie green tea with a single silk thread, or roll jasmine pearls into small balls, or scent something 14 to 18 times with fresh jasmine flowers, and while plucking them out of the blend. And it's one of those things, every year some of those things get more expensive, but to be able to deliver something that is that exceptional, it's like a grand crew.
Yeah. But I feel like we're losing a lot of those handmade products in around the world, So a guy like you looking at it, seeing the writing on the wall, where do you go next then? Like, if you can't get this handmade product, or guys aren't tying tea, how do you pivot? How do you find somebody else that's going to be doing the same thing? Are you concerned?
I'm always concerned, but it's also, there's only so much you can control, especially on the international level, and we've got enough things in the pipeline, or in the in the burner, so to speak, that there's always something new coming up, but you hate to lose some of your old standbys.
Yeah.
There's stuff that, every once in a while just will become unavailable, and you're like, why can't they send us the orchid oolong from the 300-year-old tree that's in the middle of the forest? Like, we'll pay any amount of money. It's like not about money. Possibly the tree doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, insane. So what do? Do you find a lesser product then?
So we find a lesser product, but then we're usually not into it. So then we'll kind of pivot to a different flower, maybe magnolia, maybe rose, maybe lychee, and just always have enough going on so that, some of those arts are just dying off. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. How often is when one of those arts dies off, you find something completely incredible that you didn't even know? When you're forced to look for something else?
I would say it happens a lot.
A lot, right?
A lot, but it's just, no matter what, it's like, you feel real attached to some of the things that were the first kind of badass ingredients or teas that we ever touched. Or
even some of those relationships that...
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
I mean, I have so many people who have retired. I have 6 brokers in the last, 5 years that all retired. Yeah. And these guys, like, not only treated me like, one of their own, but also just protected us at the border. And now the paperwork's so severe that old school guard doesn't want to touch it.
Right.
And I can't blame people. We work with certain countries and they're like, we don't want to fill out this paperwork for the FDA. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, please.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing is you could import those to 30 other countries and no one would care. It's like, when in doubt, it'll always be shipped to France, and then you'd figure it out sometimes.
Right. So I was just going to ask, would you ship it somewhere else and then ship it from there?
That technique, I'm mastering. I ship to more random countries, not to get around anything, but also just sometimes it'll take 8 weeks off the shipping.
Yeah, make it easier.
It'll make it so that the guys at LaGuardia aren't like, I've never seen this imported in the U.S. Like, let's just hold it. It's like this. Like, the greatest example is, we started importing this clear soy. I call it invisible soy.
Yeah.
And it looks like water, but it's soy sauce. And they found a way to clarify soy. And it's in the category of what I call stupid brilliant. Everyone can relate to soy, but who the fuck has a clear soy?
Right.
And you bring out a dish, it looks like it has nothing done to it, and it has all this flavor. And they could not understand that at the border.
No kidding.
And you just don't want to ever have words with anyone at the border. I've got a perfect record.
Yeah.
I travel usually with 12, 13 suitcases. I've never been stopped, knock on wood. And you just want to keep those angles open. But it's amazing how even when we were doing our truffle bitters, no, they didn't get at the TTB, where they check all the alcohol, the rules, and decide what's legal to drink, consume, what's potable, non-potable. They couldn't understand how our truffle bitters didn't taste like chocolate. And it's just, there's some people who just don't want to, Google anything. And, it happens. I'm just like, just open your phone and type it in. I think you'll figure it out.
Right. The alcohol content in things is something that I learned from you on Mirin.
Sure.
Mirin is like...
Oh, my God.
So the Mirin that we are using, it's not really Mirin.
It's swag.
Yeah. And the Mirin that Japan has, that has alcohol in it. So
absolutely,
you can't bring that in because you're not an alcohol importer.
Right. Well, and also it's just this weird gray area where once there's a certain type of alcohol, depending on what they put in it, then they categorize it differently. Mm-hmm. It's wild
because of the.
I mean, the Mirin thing is so huge. We could sell 20,000 bottles a month of the good shit, and people don't know how to navigate it. And there are very few liquor importers who want to touch it. It's like a whole different.
Why would a liquor importer even want to?
Yeah, it's like, well, you want to sell a couple cases of Mirin? Yeah, that sounds exciting.
Big deal, right?
So it's like, but it's just the flavors, unlike anything else.
What are some horror stories from the border that you have?
I mean, there's so many.
Yeah,
but I'd say truffles have always been
the perishable things. Are
the
probably
perishable things
right.
like wild Fras de Bois,
yes,
truffles. Right now it takes an extra. Let's just say it takes them an extra 24 to 48 hours, and then it takes maybe another 24 hours after that for them to okay it, at the border. And these perishable things are made for, it's like a 48-hour transfer.
Yeah.
And those extra 2 days, a lot of times it deflates everything you have in there.
No
and
kidding.
You got to factor it in, you know? And you can't just take it all out on the people who shipped it. Listen, no one has control of what's going to happen and who's going to be where. And now they don't even have planes. So they're like, oh, your shipments are still sitting in Provence. And you're like, how's that even possible?
Right.
You know?
Right.
But learned a lot, and it's amazing from just being at customs. Sometimes you're just there and you're like,
did you go down there and talk to these guys?
I mean, you try not to have too much of a conversation unless it's necessary, but even just seeing who's there and what people are trying to pick up, it's like a free-for-all, you know? And there's some people kind of mastered it, but it's becoming more tricky every day, and it also makes it a little more exciting.
Have they gotten better in the last 20 years? Are they more aware?
I think it's gotten worse.
Really?
I would say
because the products are getting different.
Well, I would say that they're more cautious now, which, for what we do isn't a great thing. I'd rather have a couple things that are, maybe not perfect, get through to at least, have people just have a little exposure to it. But I think there's different worries right now internationally, and unfortunately they're looking for things that have nothing to do with the food world. And you just got to accept it. I mean, I'll never forget, like, we bring in vintage pu'er, and I'm like, one time when I go through the airport, they're going to think I'm smuggling hash or something and have all these bricks in my bag. And I'm like, just give me like a CNN, arrest me in its tea, you know? It's never happened, but it's fascinating how you go through customs and, someone will accidentally ship a couple pieces of fruit and suddenly everyone on earth is going to attack them. And God knows what else. I mean, it's crazy. Just crazy.
Right. So would you say shipping is your biggest obstacle in this business?
It's a real pain in the ass right now.
Yeah.
It just, you got to watch it. It's before you didn't have to. And before it'd be even like, oh, it's dropping in California. You'll get it in 3 days. Now it's like, maybe it'll take 5. Maybe it's on a truck. I know we have tracking, but somehow we don't know where he is. It's just the craziest things you can imagine are happening.
I saw a meme one time. It said the evolution of your package. It says your order was received, out for delivery. We have no fucking idea your package has arrived.
I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah.
It's 100% the truth.
But I think with you, it's even more. I mean, for me, it's like I order from you, and I get upset that it was going to be here yesterday, but now it's here tomorrow. Like the UPS is the shipping that you're dealing with, shipping from across the world to Chicago, and then dealing with the border agents, and then getting that product, and then shipping out again. Like, it's like the 1-2 punch for you.
Absolutely. When it works, it's seamless, and then other times you're like, I cannot believe how hard it is to pull this off.
Right.
It's crazy. And now even, I mean, just even during COVID, it's like people don't get it. Like FedEx and UPS stopped guaranteeing.
They did.
And it was like, imagine, it was like they just gave up, you know? You're like, oh, I'm paying for overnight shipping, but it might get there in a week.
Right.
I mean, how is this even legal? You know what I mean? How is this possible?
Right.
It's like, it's basically like saying, oh, whatever happens is what happened.
It's like ordering Uber Eats and paying for the priority delivery just to get it 5 minutes earlier, and it's still going to come at the same time if you didn't spend the extra $5, you know?
So true.
Yeah. What are some of the craziest products that you've brought in? I know, was it whale throw up one time?
I learned a lot. Ambergris was, you know, you learn the hard way sometimes. Certain things are a little too of a gray area.
Yeah.
But, you know, Bizarre Foods gave it, you know, Andrew Zimmer gave us huge press on that one. We definitely, you know, you could sell narcotics easier than you could, you know, right. Ambergris, you learn that early on.
Yeah.
But, you know, some of the interesting things, I'm trying to think of what are some of the craziest. You know, tons of just, I mean, the Phrase de Bois, when we started that was one of the craziest things. It was like, it was perishable just buying it in France.
Well, it's so perishable picking it off the vine.
And then
clock starts.
And then, you know, sadly we had to learn that once the plane that it's on changes altitude more than a couple times, the berries start to compress.
Yeah.
And then eventually just...
Let's explain what they are. They're like really...
So it's like literally like it's a wild strawberry. It's about the size of a penny.
Yeah.
Maybe smaller. And it's like when they're ripe, that one little berry will have more flavor than an entire pint of strawberries.
It's like eating a sweet tart.
It's like it's like a revelation. So we've just been obsessed with it. I've had so many people, you know, just give us their, just really go out of their way to kind of put it on menus. And it's, you know, it's a delicacy. It's just like any fine fish you would have at a sushi restaurant or a small piece of anything. And it's just, I just love when people, the ordinary extraordinary is what keeps us going. It's like, oh, you know, strawberry, try this one.
Right.
Was that?
Right. Yeah.
You know, buckle up.
Is that the most perishable product you deal in?
I mean,
that's a big one.
Fruit. Yeah. Most anything fruit related. Truffles are a lot easier. A lot of like frozen cloudberries back in the day. Learned a long time ago that, you know, listen, to keep things frozen, it takes a very strict system. Just meaning like from a country of origin, they're like, oh, it has enough dry ice for 3 days. Yeah. My ass.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like it's slowly, you know, it's slowly going. But, you know, tea-wise, there's so much that there have been lots of tea that I've gotten and, you know, they came here and I'm like, oh, maybe this isn't so kosher and we'll throw it out or what have you. And then from those same situations, you kind of pull out something that is like the finest leaf you've ever, you know, seen in your life.
Yeah. What's the shelf life on some of these teas?
So, I mean, tea, the shelf life is, once it's vacuum sealed, nitrogen flushed, technically it could last for 6 years. Most our tea we're going through anywhere between 3 and 6 months. Yeah. But some tea is only harvested once a year. So you got to be, you know, prepared for it really almost 2 years ahead of time. So, you know, you're almost buying it before it's even picked. What is the planning? And this sounds so fucking overly complicated what you do. So the planning of it, you know. You know what it is? It's like it becomes like a sleight of hand. It's like some guy making Manhattans behind the bar. Like you could give him 4 bottles and he could probably smell them blindfolded. Yeah, good point. And do it. And I feel the same way about tea. Like, you know, people don't get that. Like there's some teas that we have. I brewed them 100,000 times. Yeah. Maybe 500,000. And literally, I can go into a restaurant with especially about 20 teas that I know better than anything else, and I could easily tell you if your water's good. You know, it'd be like, oh, this is not good water here. And they're always, it comes down to the water. They're like, why is our water bad? I'm like, listen, I've been cupping the same tea for 22 years. Yeah. It never would taste like this if the water was on. That's crazy. It's wild. So what do you look for in the water then? The water, I mean, the number one thing is always purification. And then, you know, sometimes it needs a little energy. You know, a lot of people like to do a fresh boil. That's kind of hard in a restaurant. But the key is really just having filtration into the restaurant, and you know, we've kind of taken to a new level here. Like early on when Noma got their water purifier, I came in contact with the guys who made it, and they put one in here, and it's kind of screwed us up. It's like you taste water to water, and you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe this is water.
No kidding.
And it's just, there's a lot of impurities, and there's, you know, Chicago water, people are like, it's perfect from the tap. It's fine. You're not going to die, but it's not delicious, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget when, before Alinea opened, we're sitting waiting to do a tasting with Joe Catterson and a couple guys back in the day, and I'm listening to them do a water tasting in the other room, and you know, a couple of people who were with me are like giggling, and I was just like, I'm like, this is fucking fascinating.
Yeah.
Like, this is cool as hell. It does have different flavors, you know? Maybe this one has a little more bubble, and sure, at a certain point, maybe some people see it as ridiculous, but I don't know. It's like when something is on and has that nuance, there's nothing like it.
Right. The Vichy Catalan water is like
Incredible.
salt water to me. It's like,
Absolutely.
that was the first time I drank water, and I was like, oh, what the fuck is this, man? You know, I thought something was wrong.
It's like a warm Topo Chico. You're like, what could this possibly be?
Right, yeah, Topo Chico.
There's like, you know, 3 Alka-Seltzers in there, and then it's cold and it's good.
Yeah. When did you start bringing in all these Japanese products? Like, how did that happen?
So, you know...
Because you are the premier guy in the country for Japanese products, man. Yeah.
You know,
it's not even... It's not to cut you off. It's not even that. It's... I can think of something and you already know about it. So it's like, hey, Rod, I saw this. Like, yeah, we got that. You know? It's so cool.
Thank you. Out of all the cultures in the world, my late sensei, who's no longer with us, she's about 4'1" tall, and you know, she taught me the Japanese tea ceremony, and it was like everything she ever showed me from the first day was just more miraculous than the next. And there's just all these little aspects of the Japanese cuisine, especially, and the culture, that there's so much flavor, and it's like really the foundation of umami. It's like, I mean, kombu has a higher umami, you know, level than soy sauce, than Parmesan, you know, than even MSG. It's like a whole different world. And it's like, they so get it, and there's just so many flavors. And what I loved about it is we started looking at it like a blind item, like not saying, oh, shio kombu can only be used in to top a piece of nigiri or what have you.
Right.
It's like, what if you put it in pasta?
Right. What if you put it over? Right. What if you roasted it?
Exactly. What if you stuffed a fish with it? It's like, these things have so many legs to them, and that's what I love. Nothing makes me happier than like some guy who has nothing to do with Japanese cuisine is like, I need 3 bottles of shirodashi. I need the tamari. I need the bubu arare I use in my tartare. Yeah. And it's not like, listen, I like it to be authentic, but I also love to just, I mean, you can meld cultures all day.
Right.
You know?
I mean, umami it's across every culture.
Everywhere. And it's like, it's the Doritos of the sea and everything. You know, it's like, it's just, people can relate to it once they wrap their head around it.
Correct.
You know?
I always say that Japanese and Italian culture and food, they're the same, just on opposite spectrums. One is about tomatoes and Parmesan and simplicity and being pure, and the other one's about extracting as much umami as you can and about using it in different ways. But they're very fucking similar when you just look at the cuisine, the simplicity, the tradition behind it. You know,
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
I've had some of the best Italian food I've had in my life in Japan.
In Japan, it's just some of the pizza.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's dialed in at a different level.
Right. So how did that come out? You're selling tea, you're doing this, and now all of a sudden you're importing all these Japanese products. Like, what did you know about Japanese soy sauce then?
You know, nothing. But I got a little exposure to it, got enamored by it, and then started traveling, and that was it. You know, it's like, if there's one place I wish I was able to go to every year, and the only thing that kind of stopped it temporarily is COVID, is, you know, it's Japan at least a couple times a year. It's just, I get the most out of it, but it's not even, it's like, I'm like a kid in a candy store where I'm obsessed with the metal they use, the accoutrements, what they have outside their window. There's just so many interesting aspects, and there's just almost like a historic presence where, even though the city's become more modern, there's still an old world style that exists there that's just doesn't exist in a lot of places. And it's also, they're very excited to share the culture. It's pretty amazing.
Right. I mean, they hang on to the traditions.
Yeah.
They know how to fold the traditions into the new. And that's why I think that they create the products that they do. Everything's based in tradition, even though they're doing something super modern.
It's so true.
You know? You don't deal in a lot of like fish and meats. Why not?
You know, I don't like anything too perishable. Mm-hmm. That being said, we do a ton of wild mushrooms and other stuff, but like, I don't know. I never want anything that had any cross-contamination, and was always a turnoff when you get a box from someone who also distributed fish and it smelled like fish. And it's like, sometimes you just don't want to smell fish, you know?
Have people approached you like all the time, I bet?
So many. I mean, but that's like, you know, that's how we kind of got into the hamon business. Probably one of the largest Jewish hamon dealers on earth. My great grandma's probably, you know, rolling in her, you know, in heaven and just freaking out that like, oh my God, there's a hoof on his table.
Yeah.
But it's like once you see something and you realize it could be one of the greatest, you know, examples of that particular product, I'm all about it. I just love it, you know, and it's done humanely. It's just, you know, just passion it's everywhere. You just got to look for it.
Yeah. Great point. So what's next for you? Where are you going?
Where's this
going to happen?
Sky's the limit.
Yeah.
You know, we're in so many directions, getting so many interesting people reaching out. And, you know, I think we're just going to continue to develop the brand. And, you know, I'd say right now we're probably adding between 10 and 100 new products a month. And, you know, we're just on the hunt, you know? I don't think that'll ever change. And it's just the business has changed because a lot of people, like I said, just they want to do less labor and more flavor. It's kind of, it's become a different world, you know? Not everyone has a barista. Not everyone has a lot of these things that they used to have. And you got to roll with the punches. You still got to deliver. So
the industry's really been stripped down to bare bones. Huh?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I mean, all our friends, you know, you look in some of their kitchens, you're like, how does this guy pack the place every night and he's short 5 cooks? Like, it's epic.
Right.
You just know what I mean?
It happen.
Somehow you make it happen, you know? That's all we can do.
Yeah.
But I think that the wonderful thing is there's no end in sight in terms of, I really feel like globally, and especially in the States, food is getting better.
1,000%.
You know, baked goods are getting better. They're better.
The public's
donuts.
Getting educated more properly.
I mean, no one knew how to bake bread until COVID. That's insane. Can you imagine? I mean, listen, I sure as hell I'm not a baker, but who didn't pull out some, you know, flour and start making some stuff? Right. You'd have to not have a heart or a soul, you know? So I just think people are really, the information is everywhere. They want to get involved and they want to experience things.
And it's exciting.
And it's all at different levels. Like, you know, people be like, this is my favorite restaurant. It's like, cool. That's great.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's got a different idea of what's delicious and time and a place for everything.
So it makes it interesting.
I always want to try something new, you know? Bring on the deliciousness.
Let's leave it on that note.
Honestly.
Rod, thanks for sitting down with us.
Listen, my pleasure.
Someone's trying to find you. Where do they go?
They go to rareteacellar.com with a C.
Yep.
And reach out and, you know, we'd be thrilled to work with, you know?
Yeah, your Instagram page is pretty cool, too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent.
A lot of fun stuff coming up.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, brother.
Right on.
Good to see you.